Hi, I'm Doug with Backcountry Pilgrim, and this is not a survival knife. As a child of the 80s, when I think of a survival knife, something like this is the first thing that comes to mind: the Rambo knife. I mean, the Rambo knife was big, it was sharp and scary looking, had these wicked saw teeth on the top, and of course, it had a compass, eventually, and a hollowed out handle with all kinds of cool little survival goodies in it, like matches and a little thing to light them on, fish hook, there's some other stuff in there. And as a kid, I loved watching Rambo go out into the forest. He's making clothes. He's making spears. He's killing pigs. He's starting fires. He's sewing himself up. I mean, for a young teenage boy, that just looked amazing. And so I went out and got myself a Rambo knife. Now, it's not this one. I got this at Harbor Freight for $8. That's right. Brand new, $8, worth every penny. Okay, so let's talk about what a real survival knife should be. And I'm going to do that by contrasting two related activities that are getting very popular today, especially on YouTube, and that is forest survival versus bushcraft. Bushcraft, as the name implies, is going out into the bush and crafting things. You're going to go into the forest with a particular set of skills and a particular set of tools, and you're pretty much just going to make things. You're going to make everything you want for the outdoors out of the outdoors. So if you want a chair, you're going to make a chair. You want a pot holder, you're going to make a pot holder. You want a tent stake, you're going to make a tent stake. Building shelters, building fires. The object of bushcraft is to see basically how well you can thrive in the outdoors using primitive skills and tools. Survival, on the other hand, is, well, what it sounds like. It's keeping yourself alive in an emergency situation that you are trying to get out of. Survival skills include things like making a shelter, procuring food, purifying water, doing the kinds of things you need to be able to do to stay alive while you are trying to get out of the situation that you are in. Now, as you can probably guess, there is a lot of overlap between the kinds of activities that people do when they are surviving in the forest or when they are doing bushcraft in the forest. So, for example, if you need a fire for survival, your bushcraft fire-making skills will come in very handy, and you might be doing the exact same activity, but for two totally different reasons, and that introduces a very important distinction. Many of the things that you learn how to do in bushcraft are to make your stay in the forest more comfortable so that you can prolong it. Most of the skills you need for survival, however, are trying to keep you alive so that you can get out of the situation that you're in. So while you might build a fire as a bushcrafter or a survivalist, you're probably not going to build a chair as a survivalist, and you're probably not going to worry too much about edible plants as a bushcrafter. So depending on kind of the purity of the goal of survival versus bushcraft, you are going to have different skills you're going to want to attain, different tools you're going to want to bring with you in order to achieve two very different goals. So, for example, in bushcraft, your three primary tools are typically an axe, a saw, and a knife. You want the axe for chopping, you want the saw for cutting, and you want the knife for carving. And this is because if you're going to be making a bunch of stuff out of wood, you're going to need to chop down trees, cut the logs into usable sections, and then process those down using an axe or a knife, depending on the level of fine work you need to do for the kind of thing you're trying to build. Bushcrafters are typically going to bring a lot of other stuff like paracord or fire-making tools, tarps, canvas, other things that are going to make their jobs easier depending on what they're trying to achieve out in the woods. Now, if the goal of the bushcrafter is to go as primitive as possible, they may not bring very many extra things. So, for example, a lighter. One of the coolest bushcraft projects is making a fire from scratch, using no fire starter or pre-bought kindling of any kind. This is where a lot of skill becomes necessary, finding the right materials, knowing how to make a bow drill, successfully making the bow drill. It is a very difficult process, and if you find yourself in a situation in the forest where you need to make a bow drill to have a fire, you have made a mistake. You didn't bring a little tiny lighter that would weigh less than 1 ounce that could start fires for you for months. If you don't have that with you, you have made an error, unless you're trying to see if you can start a fire without a lighter, in which case you're back to bushcraft mode. So, because there is a lot of overlap in the activities that bushcrafters and survivalists do, that means there's also going to be some overlap in the tools they use, and this is nowhere more evident than in the choice of a knife. For a bushcrafter, the knife is kind of the last tool in use when processing wood. You've got your axe to chop, you've got your saw to cut, and the knife is used for finer work. A bushcraft knife is part of a system. It is not meant to do all of the wood processing. So your typical bushcraft knife is not going to be super huge Rambo sized. It is going to be something that you can really get a lot of control on. It's going to have the kind of grind that is going to really lift the wood away so that you can do some really good whittling and that sort of thing. A nice sharp point for drilling in. And it's also going to focus on things like a really good comfortable grip. A lot of times it's going to have a nice wood handle and that sort of thing. The spine is usually going to be at a 90-degree angle so that you can use a ferro rod. But again, it's not because the use of a ferro rod is the best way to make a fire. It's just a cool way to do it if you're doing something that's more along the lines of a hobby than a survival situation. So a bushcraft knife is more of a woodworking tool than something you would take by itself out into the woods to survive with. So that brings us to the survival knife. A survival knife is going to have to do more than just fine woodworking. It's going to have to take the place of the saw and the axe because it is pretty much the only thing someone's going to have in a survival situation, and so you're going to want something quite a bit beefier. Now, the difference between this and my bushcraft knife is not just how long the blade is, but also how tough it is. This is a very thick steel. It's got a lot better grip, even a finger choil style with jimping on the top, so you can really get on top of this thing. And the reason is I can use this for fine work, but I can also swing this as a chopper and use it almost like a machete. If you think you're going to be using your knife to hack through wilderness, you might as well just get a machete. I picked this one up for less than $20 at Harbor Freight. It's fantastic and it looks wicked cool. However, this machete is pretty much useless for any of the other functions that I get a knife for. Further, this knife is not going to break if I need to pry something, if I need to baton it through wood to split it like an axe. This is more of an all-around useful tool. Now you might say, well, why not just use this for bushcraft then? Well, it's because although the survival knife is kind of an all-in-one woodworking implement, it doesn't do better than any of the three tools that a bushcrafter uses in those situations. You can chop with this, but not as good as you could with an axe. You can hack away through something, but it's not going to be as clean as if you just use a saw. And although it can be used for finer work, it's not going to be as good as something made for that specifically. So a real survival knife has to be very strong, very tough. You're trusting your life to this thing, so it cannot fail. It cannot break. And one of the things that makes a survival knife so strong is that it is a single piece of steel. This goes all the way through. The handles are just bolted on to this piece of metal. If I'm hacking away at something, the blade isn't going to break off the handle and come flying, stick me in the eye or something. And that's the problem with something like this. This whole big giant monster blade is only attached to this hollow aluminum handle by this one little tiny Allen bolt. I can pretty much guarantee that if I take a swing at something with this blade is going to pop right off the handle and become useless. Now you might be thinking, okay, Doug, maybe the Rambo style knife isn't good for a chopper, but look at that saw. Why couldn't you use that? That's one of the main tools of the bushcrafter, right? Well, the problem is most of these are not very good. The saw is only this big. So if you're trying to go through something of any kind of size, you're just going to be jiggling back and forth until you make a bit of a cut. I have tried to use this on wood, and honestly, it is extremely difficult to use. Even on something really big that doesn't move at all, it doesn't get a whole lot of bite. And if you try to use it on something small, it basically just grabs it and twists it around. It's stainless steel, it's very sharp, so it is going to have a bit of toughness there. But for prying, for chopping, for hacking, for fine work, this isn't going to do well in any of those situations. But it's still super cool looking. So just how big of a blade do you need for a survival knife? Well, it seems like most people draw the line at about 5 inches. 5 or below is going to be good for a bushcraft knife because you're going to have a lot of control over that for your fine work. But for something that's going to be a chopper, a prier, and that kind of thing, you want something a bit bigger. So for example, this is the Ka-Bar BK2. This is probably about as small as you would want to go for a survival knife. Although it isn't very much longer than my bushcraft knife, look at how thick this thing is. I have literally stuck this knife in a log and stood on it, and it is no worse for the wear. This thing is a brute. It's pretty much a crowbar and an axe in one, so I would say that legitimate survival knives are going to probably start right about here, and if you want a longer version of this, they have several. For something that is more regular survival knife size, I would look at something like the Ontario Knife Company Rat 7. This is a lot bigger. It still allows you to get up on top of it for some good work. It's also fairly inexpensive. What is this Bushcraft knife, you might be asking? Well, this is the BPS Adventurer. This is almost without a doubt the best deal knife on the internet. It's only about $35. You've got a real wood handle, steel blade, comes extremely sharp right out of the box, and it comes with a very nice leather holster and its own ferro rod. I have links to all of these knives in the video description below. Using those links below does help the channel financially at no extra cost to you, so I do appreciate if you use them. I do have other videos that take a deeper dive into some of this gear. You can check those out here. If you have enjoyed the video, would you mind giving it a like and subscribe to Backcountry Pilgrim if you are into hiking, camping, backpacking, bushcraft, survival, and the gear that goes with it. Until next time, I'm Doug. Thanks for watching. Tell you what, I've been out here for hours today, and I have seen 0 pigs.